Started with our special meeting today with the treasurer. Today's date is February 4, 2025. The time is 3 p.m. In attendance are Commissioners Eberline, Duncan, and Matari. I want to call this meeting to order. Are there any changes to the agenda? Hearing none. Public comment? Hearing none. Let's move on to our one business item. Implementation of XTR Consulting Modification Number 4 within the Aumentum database computer system, and we have Treasurer Matheson with us.
Thank you. What I'd like to do is start out with Simpatico. This was an assessor-initiated change to help the process here at Kootenai County come more in compliance with how the state does things. The assessor and both the treasurer are going to benefit from these changes. However, there will be some required testing needed to be done on the part of the treasurer's office to make sure that the changes that were made actually don't break our processes, so that we're still capable of processing tax notices at the end of the year. With that said, what I wanted to do is just have a conversation with the board to make sure that I'm heading in the right direction. And that is, if you recall, the county adopted a budgetary item last year for the treasurer in the amount of $180,000 to do business process analysis. And it was actually identified that XTR would be the consultant to do that. With this change made, Simpatico, this is a higher priority for us, and I think also for the assessor's office. So what I'd like to do is redirect those budgeted and approved funds to utilize for the testing that needs to be done so that we know that we can generate tax notices. I don't think technically I needed to come before the board, but I think in the spirit of policy 930 and keeping everybody abreast of what's going on, I wanted to get you guys your input, whether that's appropriate, whether you want me to move forward. I've got a scope of work that we've drafted and agreed upon verbally with XTR. Sam and I and Jill have gone over it extensively. I'm going to submit it with your approval to move forward to both legal and the board for adoption or for signature. From the standpoint of the amount of funds that we're going to dedicate to this, I can go into detail if you'd like, but at this point, what I'd like to do is see what kind of questions you want or have.
Any questions?
Do you expect the scope of work to take up all the funds, or are we in? We don't know.
Originally, we had 180,000 budgeted, so right now it is our best guess, but it'll be a fraction of that, somewhere between, I think, 50 some odd thousand and on the high of 84,000.
Okay. We
do also believe that the amount of work that XTR Consulting will be doing is we'll be able to maybe benefit, and they can document and perform some of that business process analysis that we had hired them, because they're going to be checking a lot of the things anyway. So it won't be, exactly a 2-for-1, but we're going to get some, I think, benefit from them doing this testing and also accomplishing the business process analysis.
Commissioner Eberline? I'm kind of curious, just want to make sure it's real clear that the changes so far have been made on the assessor's side, and now the testing is to make sure it doesn't affect the treasurer's side. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And do you expect anything to be possibly uncovered where you might have to make some adjustments on the treasurer's side during this testing? Or is this just strictly just to make sure that what was done on the assessor's side will work well for the treasurer's side?
Well, the process that we follow, and I think one of the primary reasons why the assessor went down this path was we're trying to migrate towards what the state does. And there's a lot of reporting and checklists and dashboards that once the assessor made their change, we're now kind of down the same path, and we must do the same thing. And when we do this testing, it should be focused on what they've done, but it's, I think, inevitable that there'll be other things that will pop up because we are trying to migrate towards the state. And we're trying to anticipate it all, but there could be some surprises.
Have we done the testing on the assessor side, Assessor Kovacs? I see you're here.
So we've done testing of Project Simpatico in two ways. First, we relied quite heavily on XTR that did a lot of testing themselves. They had access to our test database and they performed extensive testing. We also had our staff perform tests on our processes. Tests using, and I'm going to look to Dyson to confirm whether I'm saying this correctly or not, to confirm that we're using the TSB dashboard processes, which are the state processes, on the dashboard correctly, and that those work correctly for us with Simpatico. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, that is correct. We're still waiting on some scripting from the state for operating property. There's one script that we need from them to finish fully running through the state process for operating property. They haven't had to give it to us before, so we're just waiting on some of our people down at the state to get that for us.
Okay, so if you're waiting on something, would that testing for the treasurer's office be affected because you might have some additional changes, and then we would test, and then you would add more code, I would presume, on the assessor's side, and then we would almost have to retest again? Is that a possibility? I mean,
I think I can answer that. The role, he's talking about one role that's the operating property role that comes from the state. While they're working on the operating property role, XTR can be working on all of our other roles and then only deal with operating property and checking to see that the taxes calculate correctly after they're finished with.
And I would expect that you guys probably should have that buttoned up in the next week or so, right?
Well, we don't, I mean, it's the state that does the operating property in the state of Idaho. So we know that there's some scripts and some programming that needs to be processed by the state to take that into account and consideration. I believe that there were separate processes that don't involve the assessor's office, but they occur on the treasurer's side for operating property when it comes to applying the operating property tax. Mm-hmm. I don't want to say that wrong.
Yeah, we calculate it the same as we calculate all the rest of the taxes, but it's a separate role. So we calculate it separately.
okay.
We don't produce an operating property role per se.
I think
Locally.
if I understand correctly, and Matt, please correct me if I'm wrong, the issue is that the way that we've been uploading the operating property role that we receive from the state is surprisingly completely different than the way every other county in the state of Idaho does it. And so this is with Simpatico, the upload is going to be completed in a totally different manner, and they just have to make sure it uploads as expected. Mm-hmm. And then once it uploads, we'll multiply the values by the levy rates. And
I think where some of the confusion enters in is because for all other roles, we're involved. And when it comes to operating property, we really aren't. And if there's a unique process that occurs here in Kootenai County, then it is a Kootenai County process and not necessarily an assessor process.
Yeah, well, I think we all kind of understand that because that's kind of the system that you walked into. My only concern, and I speak out of ignorance here in the sense that I don't understand the software intimately, but if we're going to test something, my experience has been finish everything on Section A before you test over here, because if you test and it works and then you make a change over here, you could end up having an issue. I just don't know. Now, I saw that Sam Wilkins, did you want to say something? You had your hand up.
I was just going to clarify something, but the assessor handled it. Thank you.
Okay, all right, and Sam's from XTR. Okay, well, I'm fine with it if all of you are fine with it. I just wanted to ask the questions for the sake of it.
I wanted to add one more thing. It seems to make sense to me that if we're considering, if the board is now considering this request made by the treasurer, that the coding that we as a county need from the state for the operating property seems reasonable to me that should be a part of this new process that they're talking about, and because it's relating to a function that they're doing, so.
Not quite sure I'm following you there.
Yeah, me neither.
Can you
We're
say it
talking-
differently?
We're talking about testing. The treasurer's making a request for an expanded scope to do and perform testing. I would say inclusive of that would be testing of the coding that comes from the state, which is your request. Let's incorporate that into this body of work so that when the testing is done, it takes into account that new coding that's forthcoming from the State Tax Commission.
So you're saying include in the testing process what you are what you're waiting on from the state right now?
Exactly, yes.
Okay. I mean, does that work for the treasurer's office? Does that work for XTR?
Yeah.
Matt?
From
Hey, why don't you, one of y'all come up to the table and,
I was just going to say that I don't see how that testing has anything to do with the treasurer's office. The testing for that is very much in the assessor's office. They build the roll. That's the biggest part and the biggest challenge that we have is how we're different than the state is because of things called shadow tags, and this project is that's been the major focus is to not use those anymore, which will then allow us to use the state methodology to build the operating property. That's 100% an assessor process to build the roll, not treasurer. So I'm sorry I'm speaking out of turn for you guys, but to me, it's like all the other rolls. You guys build it, you test how it builds, and then it comes over to the treasurer, and they test how the taxes work on it. So to put the whole thing over on the treasurer just seems, I mean, they don't have anything to do with how you build the roll, so.
well, I don't see that as putting it on the treasurer's office as much as it's just whatever ultimately the assessor's office builds, we're going to be testing that on the treasurer's side.
I thought he was
And that's what I meant,
No.
Commissioner
Yeah.
Matari, that's exactly what I meant is where I'm wrapping it all together in another step that needs to be done now. Let's just call it testing, because that's really what we're talking about. And we need coding from the state to do that.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
Well, how, and you think you'll have that in a week?
We have to follow up. You want to speak to, have you had conversations with?
I have not heard from Sandy. I believe Matt has reached out for the one script that we're waiting for. I don't know if he's heard anything from them, but IT runs the script.
Okay.
We'll run that part of the script.
Part of the
checklists.
challenge is that they're limited on resources, the State Tax Commission, and
I understand. So what about on the treasurer's office side? How much time do you have before you need to have an answer to whether or not this testing works?
We're trying to accommodate the assessor and implement simpatico as quickly as possible. So we don't need anything done immediately. This is all trying to accommodate the schedule of the assessor, which they've repeatedly emphasized as quickly as possible. So,
All right, well, I hope you all don't mind me asking a bunch of questions up here, just to try to help facilitate this to a favorable outcome. Would 2 weeks additional affect your office?
Yeah.
If the state could come up and and you could build the roll once you get these scripts, right? So it won't take long to build the roll and test it. Dyson, would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, at this point, as we're working through the checklist, there are certain scripts that we need IT to run, and then we do some processes on our side per the checklist that we get from the state. So we just are missing that key piece. But once we have that, we can start working our way through the steps, and it won't be that difficult to move forward.
Commissioner Matari, the objective always has been that we all work together and that we have a good product that we can all rely and depend upon. So I'm not so sure that we need to set a limit of 2 weeks, but as soon as possible, certainly, because we want to begin realizing the payoff and the benefit of the work that's been done. And we're going to benefit from it every bit as much as the treasurer and all of Kootenai County.
I understand. It's just the time that you get will be less time for the treasurer's office in case they come into any issues. And so that's why I'm just trying to figure out where a reasonable cutoff can be between the transition from the assessor's office over to the treasurer's office for this work.
Well, I'm amenable to extending it if we need to. Because I don't.
Yeah, but you have statutory deadlines too, and I don't know how that would affect it.
The only thing I
Sam?
was going to add, Commissioner, sorry, is that
Sam, do you want to come up and just sit down and you can
Yeah.
turn on the thing and a microphone? Thanks.
there we go. So the only thing I want to add a little clarity to, both offices need to test each one of these. You recognize that, we do too. The assessor's office will not be on the critical path for the treasurer. So 2 weeks, ample time. 3 weeks is ample time. We still have a lot of work to do to get the treasurer stuff up, so I don't see this as any impact. It potentially could be, and I think that's what you're concerned about, that we need to make sure they go forward. So we do have a critical path on the state to get this stuff to us. But as far as the way we see the testing going, I don't see one impacting the other right off the bat.
Well, let me just
We,
further clarify, and this will go back to conversations that I think the assessors had, particularly their busy season coming up in May.
Right.
So we do have if the assessor wants to get this all finished and put to bed, they're going to be coming up to a lot of staff time commitments in May. So from the standpoint of working backwards, we can do whatever. That's not our busy period of time. And that's why we're trying to work with them as much as possible so that we can hurry up and get this all done so that they're not going in different directions in May. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sounds like what you can do, I'm sorry, did you want to say something? It sounds like what you can do, according to Sam here, is that there are things you can test on the treasurer's office that are just mutually exclusive of the assessor's office, so you can get that out of the way. And then when the assessor's office has their final scripts come in from the state, then you can test the two, the interrelatedness between the two departments. Is that what I'm hearing?
that's correct.
Okay, well, then it sounds like you guys are on top of it. And
Yeah.
so this is just a discussion item today. Is there any,
Can you advise me how you would like us to proceed with the adoption of the actual contract that we drafted? Do you want it to go to legal first? Do you want us just to send it to you directly? Do you want it to be approved at a business meeting? What's your preference?
anyone want to speak to that?
Yeah, go ahead and send it to legal and let them know that if they can get it done by 9 a.m. for Tuesday business meeting, we've shifted it because Commissioner Matari will be out of town that afternoon. Or if you wanted to wait till the 18th, you could do that at 2 o'clock. But it sounds like a very,
It's
yeah,
2 pages.
yeah. And so I'm sure that your legal counsel would be able to get to that before Tuesday at 9 a.m. So that would be my preference.
No, I think it's appropriate. It should go through legal first. And then just get it on the soonest meeting, business meeting. That makes sense, unless there are some other extenuating circumstances where you want to get this thing executed.
Is Tuesday soon enough?
Commissioner Eberlein?
I wish the state would just take over the problem.
Yeah, well,
Well, I would disagree, because I've already seen what the state's done to another department, and
with the initials public defender. Yeah, so you're good at this point with him?
Yeah.
Okay, well, then you have direction. So, thank you. That concludes business public comment. Hearing none, 3:19, meeting adjourned. Thank you.